June 22nd, 2024. Well, we get back into our situation that's been I haven't touched for a little bit, the Ukraine war, which is one of my ongoing areas of focus, as well as U.S. politics. And of course, coming up on the presidential debate, it's going to be interesting to see how former President Trump addresses his position on the subject, given the Republican Party is kind of split down the middle on the subject. And at least at the political level, I don't know in the public exactly. I think the public is less split than the Congress is. And of course, so we'll have to see how he handles that. But I want to get into kind of some latest developments in the Ukraine war and kind of what we're looking at now, and maybe some of the politics around it. I mean, it does look like that the big pseudo peace conference in Switzerland was a bust and didn't really accomplish anything. And we sent Kamala Harris over there to handle that, so that wasn't too much. And then, of course, we've had the Putin peace plan, which has been thoroughly rejected. And of course, it might that might have a point coming up too. And of course, then we have the actual combat, which is ongoing. And it looks like that there's a NATO conference coming up in July, and apparently they're also potentially going to have a rotation in who the NATO Secretary General is. So it's possible. It looks like that the Ukraine wants to do some kind of an offensive before that to show credibility, and hopefully, from their point of view, at least to get more aid flowing in from the West, and I guess taking a more aggressive stance. I mean, if they kind of would like to get a world war going if they could. I just don't think they realize if a world war happened, they'd get blown up too. But anyhow, at any rate, that seems to be in the just often to see what's going to happen. But essentially, that a lot of focus has been, of course, on this Kharkiv and incursion that's been going on for about 7 weeks now, I guess, which is pretty well stalled out. However, I think it was always misperceived. I think it was always, as I've said previously, I think it's a deflection. It's basically a feint. And it looks like, for whatever reason, perhaps Zelensky, being not the brightest strategist in the world, decided to throw an excessive amount of their forces there to try to push the Russians back into Russia proper. So, and they've made a few minor inroads, although it looks to me like they probably are going to end up taking a lot of casualties doing this, because the actual amount of Russian troops committed isn't that great. And so, given the number of troops per square kilometer or something, and the number of artillery rounds and bombs going into a square kilometer, are probably a good statistical measure of what the casualties are going to be. And since the Ukrainians have got maybe 3 times as many troops, they're probably going to take more casualties. Plus, they've been launching a pretty massive, I guess, attempt to conscript more people into the Ukrainian military, and have been giving them pretty much minimal training and then throwing them into the front line. Seems to be what they used to be claiming Russia was doing some time back. And it looks like, well, maybe something like 2 years ago, that might have been the case, or a year and a half ago, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that the Russians are training pretty well and are bringing in systematically. So we'll have to see how that goes. But for the moment, the word is that the Ukrainians are about to unleash this next offensive in the next few days, apparently. At least that seems to be what I've been picking up by monitoring the various YouTube channels that cover this subject. But if you like these videos, please give me a like. And always looking for more subscriptions, of course. And also, if you run across this on some of my social media posts and you're not a member of YouTube, you can always subscribe to my Rumble channel, where I also post the same videos. Yeah, so that's what we're kind of looking at here. on various developments the Ukrainian side, of course, they've been using their new American-supplied ATACMS missiles and HIMARS, and I think they're also using this ground-launched small-diameter bomb thing that you can launch out of HIMARS launchers too. There's been a little bit of debate. I think, well, people have been suggesting that the Russians are conducting airstrikes with small-diameter bombs, but I'm looking at what I've seen in the videos that have been posted. The pattern to me looks like it's more likely to be just rockets fired out of that have small diameter bombs as a warhead, and that increases the range and effectiveness of the HIMARS, and that may be what those really are. But maybe they could be aircraft. I'm not sure, but I'm more inclined to that. It doesn't look like at this point, obviously, there's been some attacks on that degraded some of the Russian air defenses, apparently. It's unclear just how many and how severely that is the case, and the degree to which they can replace with other systems. There have been attacks on, again, attacks on oil storage facilities and that sort of thing, but using Ukrainian drones, where the Russians have been focused on hitting airfields and the power generation. Apparently, they've knocked the electric power generation capacity of Ukraine down somewhat, up to a pretty low level, apparently. So, and the other interesting thing that's been thrown into this whole battle is this new FAB 3000. That's a free air bomb or something like that, and it's the Russian equivalent to our JDAM, except this thing is based on a 3,000 kilogram, that's 6,600 pound bomb. That's a big bomb. And the real question I was having is, well, what aircraft do they have that could deliver it? Well, of course, a bomber could do it, something like the Tu-22 series bombers, or the Blackjack or the Bear, but I don't think they're going to fly any of those over the line of contact to actually drop a bomb, because they could run into one of those SAM systems we're providing and lose a major strategic aircraft. So it looks like the tactical aircraft that's being used apparently is a version of the Su-34, which has a special modification to handle this gigantic bomb. And apparently they have very few of those aircraft in service. I guess they're kind of making a new version that does that. And it looks like there's been 2 uses of this weapon so far, as of this recording, that I've seen videos of. And it apparently didn't quite hit the target, but it hit close enough. It still pretty much destroyed the target anyhow, because the blast was so big. I mean, I'm a little questioning whether this is a good idea. I mean, the U.S. usually the 2,000 pound class bomb is usually our main weapon, a JDAM with 2,000 pound bomb. Very effective. It's what the Israelis were using a lot in the Gaza campaign that has created a lot of stir. You can see what those do. So I'm a little bit, do they really need I don't know. It seems like the Russians, they're the ones that did the largest nuclear test in history, although the bomb was so impractical, it wouldn't even fit in the bomb bay of a Bear. And, well, I think that was a propaganda bomb more than a real, device that you would use for the most part. Although the actual yield of their super torpedo is another question, but they have a certain psychology about it. At any rate, that will presumably be used to if they get it perfected and get enough delivery system to smash large hard points. And the concussion of that thing must be tremendous. In fact, it might be almost as destructive in a shockwave sense as a very low yield nuke might be, for a number of reasons, which are kind of technical, but a conventional weapon, I mean, when you get down to very low yields, the conventional weapon, I think, naturally converts a lot more of its energy into a shock wave, where low yield nukes have a lot of just radiation flash, neutrons, gamma rays, that sort of thing, but doesn't produce as much shock wave. So it probably is on the level of the really low yield devices that used to be in the inventory that we had, that we have since gotten rid of. But yet this is a big, heavy thing. It's not the size of something like the old Davy Crockett or something. This is a honking big piece of steel, and with filled with high explosives, of course. But anyway, that's in play. So we'll see. I'm just sort of skeptical of how much progress they're really going to make with this offensive, because for one thing, there's still a firepower difference, I think, that favors the Russians in this case, and also and they have to take the offensive with troops that are largely poorly trained, and the rest of them are going to be some of their more elite units that are going to be kind of shepherding the other people to their doom. And if they lose these units in this conflict, I mean, that's going to weaken their overall posture. Meanwhile, the Russians have been slowly but surely nibbling away throughout the southern districts. So, well, that's that. We'll just have to see what this turns into. On the other hand, I mean, Putin has been on his little tour to the few places he can go to. He went to North Korea and Vietnam for a welcome, and I guess he's signed a peace pact, armistice pact, I guess you'd call it, with the North Koreans, which apparently is going to continue to assist them in developing their nuclear program, I guess in return for more 152 millimeter artillery shells, which, in my opinion, is one of the really bad things about this war. I mean, remember, at one time, Russia was actually cooperating on UN sanctions against North Korea, and now they're blatantly taking the other side and vetoing these kind of things. And I mean, the last thing we need is having North Korea having a more effective missile that can reach the United States. This is not something we want, and that's probably what we're likely to get out of this. I mean, the situation is going in a dangerous direction, and for what gain, I don't see. I think it was a lot better when we were cooperating, reining in countries like Iran and North Korea rather than supporting them. And that's what we've really accomplished with all this, I think. Meanwhile, Ukraine is not really gaining ground, and it doesn't look like Russia is about to collapse either. So anyway, so that's kind of my thought on that, and we'll have to see how this comes up again in the debate. I think that's an interesting question, how Trump handles that subject. It's a tricky one because you've got your Republican hawks in the House and the key committees, and then you have the rest of them that are not too keen for spending the money on it. And given the fact you can't cut spending anywhere else, we've been trying, but we ended up doing a continuing resolution, which didn't really get us what we needed. So that's kind of the situation. We'll see what they make of this giant bomb and how many of them they can actually drop, and do they lose their one or two planes in some kind of what they call a SAM bush, where you move a SAM site up and then turn it on at the last minute, and kind of how they killed those A-50s a while back. And apparently the word is now that it really was a Patriot on the first one, and the second one must have been an S-200 long-range variant. And so, so that's kind of how that is. The other thing that's sort of interesting is that apparently Ukraine is actually playing anti-personnel minefields on the Romanian border with Ukraine, not to keep Romanians out, of course, but to keep their own people from running away to Romania. So I don't know. A lot of these people are conscripting. We're not sure how aggressive they're likely to be in combat, but they're kind of trapped in a situation. But some of them are apparently not getting much training at all in the use of weapons. So that will be interesting. So that's kind of what we're looking at there on that. We have the ongoing discussion that Putin is considering changing his nuclear doctrine. But I've gone through those issues before. I still am sticking to my position that, Russia is very unlikely to use a nuclear weapon, I think, at this point, as long as their conventional forces are successful and they're upgrading those with this thing I'm just discussing. The other thing I've noticed is, in addition to the some French Foreign Legion, there apparently now I'm hearing that some Canadian special forces are going to Ukraine also. And I'm not sure what they're going to be doing, assisting in training or something like that. Or maybe just reviewing the quality of the defenses they have. That's one of those kind of interesting developments. That increasingly NATO countries are getting themselves involved in this conflict, and it could be heading for a really bad outcome eventually. I think that's what I'm sort of concerned about here. Um, so at any rate, we'll keep monitoring the situation and looking forward to what happens in the debate also. So I'll be posting this one on YouTube and Rumble as always, and the address of my social media accounts are in the description below. So that'll be it for this time.